morning. Thank God it's Friday, September 19, 2025. Of course, this is a set of Inside Nigeria, your breakfast show on Leadership Television. My name is Winifred Ugbebo, your host on the program. On this first segment of the program, we are looking at what the national papers are saying, including Nigeria's foremost Friday newspaper, Leadership Friday. We'll see what Leadership has on its main cover. However, before we came on site, most of the papers we have on our lineup are still on the developing story on Rivers State. It was reported this morning that Fubara, Similaye Fubara, the suspended governor whose suspension has been lifted by President Bola Tinubu, has not resumed as at today, this morning. Let's go with Leadership newspaper this Friday. It says, Rivers Fubara not seen in public. Assembly resolves to probe Ibas, that is the sole administrator for the 6-month suspension. Rivers Fubara not seen in public. Assembly resolves to probe Ibas. Supporters disappointed with governor, deputy for failing to show up at government house gate. Of course, yesterday we saw mammoth crowd gathered at the government gate, singing, dancing to welcome Similaye Fubara into the government house. But unfortunately, they left disappointed. The second write down the Leadership leading story says, Wike says he won't impose commissioners on Fubara, cause Atiku Tambuwa consistent betrayers. Leading story today on Leadership Friday. Of course, if we have time, we'll have our River State correspondent, leadership analyst, Anayo Nukuga, joining us to brief us on the developments. However, we'll move on to the continuation of the paper review. Niger Benue Rivers at peak levels agency. Edo leaders want transparency in Oshomo power deals. UBA records 1.608 trillion naira gross earnings, 335 billion naira after tax profit in first half. ADC wants Supreme Court to interpret section on emergency declaration. Of course, it's part of what we are going to be discussing in our second half today, because it was reported that there were so many, about 40 court cases challenging the imposition of emergency rule in Rivers State, and none of those cases was heard by Supreme Court. You have to stay tuned for the second part of the program for our guest in the studio to throw more light on that. Well, we'll continue on the review of front headline stories. Ajakuta Steel firm will be revived, federal government insists. Ohanese seeks Nnamdi Kanu's immediate release. That story is on page 14 of Leadership. Lagos fire death toll his 10 as Tinubu Sanwo-Olu orders mourn. The story continues on page 24 of Leadership Friday. Beside the masthead, government unveils mega passport center, promises 1-week delivery. Of course, with the increase in international passports, one can't expect less. Atop the mindset of Leadership Friday, I won't be blackmailed over doctors' demands, coming from Wiki. Published recipients of 330 billion naira payouts to poor Nigerians. Labour tests government. It was in the papers yesterday when the federal government says about 330 billion naira has been paid out to the poorest of the poor, about 8.1 million households. And in response to that, Labour has come out to challenge the federal government to publish the recipients of the 330 billion naira. From there, for the cover, we move to the page 3 of Leadership, where we have the permanent page stand. Today's stand is on Nigeria and the global teacher shortage crisis. Nigeria and the global teacher shortage crisis. As the world grapples with a deepening teacher shortage, Nigeria stands at the epicenter of this educational catastrophe, threatening the foundation of Sustainable Development Goal 4, SDG 4, for inclusive and quality education by 2030. United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, has sounded the alarm. By 2030, the globe will require an additional 44 million primary and secondary teachers to meet universal education targets, with attrition rates nearly doubling from 4.62% in 2015 to 9.06% in 2022. We move towards the conclusion of that stand. It says, as a newspaper committed to good governance, we urge President Bola Tinubu's administration, state governors, and the National Assembly to prioritize this crisis. The global teacher shortage is a wake-up call. Nigeria cannot afford to lag. By investing in educators, we invest in our children's future, ensuring SDG 4 becomes reality rather than rhetoric. The time for excuses is over. Action must begin now, or we risk a generation lost to ignorance and iniquity. It's from that stand on page 3, we move to the back page today where we have conversation with Azu, also a permanent fixture. Today's conversation is on Hussaini's fight for London House from the grave shames us. Hussaini's fight for London House from the grave shames us. Today's conversation with Azu, and a quote, however, in an extraordinary interpretation of the judgment that left many speechless, Ozekome told leadership that the judgment was not an indictment. Quote from today's conversation with Azu, Hussaini's fight for London House from the grave shames us. Of course, this is also a developing story. We know of a London court who declared null the attempt by our legal jurist, senior advocate of Nigeria, constitutional lawyer, Michael Zekome's attempt to take over the house he said was bequeathed to him by the late Jeremiah Hussaini, former FCT minister. Unfortunately, the judge ruled that it was not in his name, and that name that it was in does not exist. Before we leave the back page, let's visit Ghana Must Go. Today's news on Ghana Must Go: Anambra ranks 33rd in national education ranking. Anambra ranks 33rd in national education ranking. News. And of course, Ghana Must Go replied, Soludo solution. It's on that note we conclude review of leadership this Friday morning. For more, log into the website of leadership, www.leadership.ng. From leadership, we move to the next paper we have on our lineup, still on the developing story in Rivers State, like I mentioned earlier. And we move over to the Punch. The Punch says emergency rule uncertainty in Rivers as Fubara delays return. Emergency rules uncertainty in Rivers as Fubara delays return. Governor in Abuja may resume today, according to an aide. Assembly members resume. Wike denies plot to impose appointees on governor. And just the last story on the masthead of, beside the masthead of the Punch, manufacturing port B widens 14 trillion naira trade deficit. That concludes the review of front headline stories on the Punch newspaper this Friday. They have an advertorial taking a larger part of the cover today. So it's on that note we conclude review. For more, log into the website of the Punch newspaper. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Vanguard. Vanguard is still on Rivers. Assembly resumes sitting. Fubara fails to show up. Rivers Assembly resumes sitting. Fubara fails to show up. Leading story on today's Vanguard. House urges Fubara to forward commissioners list appropriation bill. Asks governor to probe Ibas expenditure. Massive crowd leave in disappointment after waiting 12 hours. I've spoken to Fubara. He has assured he will resume. Wike adds are forgiving him. Ibas quit seeks support for Fubara. Says Tinubu's mandate achieved. Cautions against crippling state again. Tinubu playing God in Rivers, coming from ADC. Atiku Obi others speak. Kickers to the leading story on today's Vanguard newspaper. Assembly resumes sitting. Fubara fails to show up. The story continues on page 5 of the paper. Osun local government crisis probe judicial irregularities. PDP tells CJ. Abuja lays 2. Fusengbuwa ruling house in leadership face off. And we move towards the masthead of Vanguard. Above it, we have UBA delivers 335 billion naira profit after tax, gross earnings up 17% to 1.608 trillion naira. Government ends passport production at multiple centers after 62 years. Marketers want us to increase pump price by 75 naira, coming from Dangote. Marketers want us to increase pump price by 75 naira. Coming from Dangote. Flood alert. Federal government raises fresh alarm as Rivers, Niger, Benue reach peak level. Plateau targets Middle East halal market to boost economy, says Mutwang. NGE pays courtesy visit to governor. And that brings to a close the review of front headline stories on Vanguard newspaper this Friday. For more, log into the website of Vanguard. We move ahead to the next paper on our lineup, and that is Daily Sun. Daily Sun is still talking Rivers. He said Rivers Assembly to probe Ibas. Atiku ADC tackle Tinubu over emergency rule. CDHR hates Fubara's reinstatement. Rivers elders preach unity, reconciliation. Beneath that leading story, Osun PDP asks Federal High Court CJ to probe suspicious letters on local government funds case. Passports now to be ready under 24 hours. $6 billion fraud. EFCC rearranges as power minister. That's the leading story on Daily Sun. We move towards the masthead. Federal government warns of looming downstream flooding as rivers, Niger, Benue, others hit peak levels. Lastly, on the cover of Daily Sun, Governor Ba Enugu to generate 1,000 megawatts from coal, says we will not treat our coal as stranded asset. Enugu Air to take delivery of 6 planes before year end. NBCC President, Enugu Estate on the move, witnessing infrastructural expansion under Umba. However, that is congratulations to Enugu State. Many of these states now are taking to airline business, starting from Akwa Ibom. That is Ibom Air. And that concludes the review of Daily Sun newspaper this Friday. For more, log into the website of Daily Sun. We move ahead to the last paper we have on our lineup. Incidentally, this paper does not have the River State as its main cover story, and that paper is The Guardian. Guardian has a big story today on Friday. Every Friday comes out with different big story. Brain drain, exhausted doctors, long wait times test public hospitals' care capacity. Leading story today on The Guardian newspaper. Brain drain, exhausted doctors, long wait times test public hospitals' care capacity. Of course, we have the picture of doctors attending to the illustration of doctors attending to a patient in the hospital. Group raises alarm over massive data breach in Nigeria. Federal government unveils innovating loan scheme for retirees. Suspense, disillusion as Fubara fails to show up after emergency rule ends. UBA delivers 335 billion naira profit after tax, 1.6 trillion naira gross earnings. Osun PDP wants suspicious letters on federal government funds case probed. That takes us to the stories just beneath the masthead of The Guardian. Investors avoid places where politicians control judiciary, says Jonathan. BOI secures adaptation funds mandate to drive Nigeria's climate action. Lastly, on the cover of The Guardian, NAS withdraws contract circulars as 23.9 trillion naira capital budget rolls into 2026. And that concludes the review of front headline stories on The Guardian this Friday. For more, log into the website of The Guardian newspaper, www.guardian.ng. It's also on this note to bring to a close the first half of the program. Like I mentioned earlier, don't go away. We have the second part of the program where discussions will begin coming in shortly. Stay tuned.
Leadership TV for God and country.
Yes, welcome back to the program Inside Nigeria. To the second half, we are going to be having discussions on some of the trending stories, especially on the emergency rule that has just been lifted by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu yesterday in a press statement. However, the governor, despite the fanfare that waited, a mammoth crowd that waited at the government house to receive him, did not show up yesterday. With me in the studio to discuss this trending issue on emergency rule is my guest. He's a public affairs analyst, Ismail Idris. Good morning and welcome to this program.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
And my name is Winifred Ubebo. Thank you so much. So yesterday, the president actually lifted the 6 months emergency rule in Rivers State, reinstating Similaye Fubara to the government house. However, Fubara did not show up yesterday. What does that portend? Like he told us earlier that his spirit, is it true that his spirit has actually left that place? Because during the Thanksgiving service in the church, he mentioned that his spirit has left that place.
Well, the president has done the needful. He has fulfilled his promise. And having seen that putting all the dots together, peace has been restored in River State. So it's just for the governor to equally do the needful, come back to office and start doing the business of governance. Constitution does not deal with spirits; it deals with human beings.
Yeah.
You understand? So it's just what we can't see. We can't use it to judge. We don't even know whether he has emergency personally.
Yes, there's reports that he's in Abuja that he's going to resume today, Friday. But as it were, as we speak, he's yet to resume.
Yeah, today has not closed.
Okay.
The day is 24 hours.
Okay. Now, secondly, again, the president did mention that, of course, not even mentioning, during the imbroglio at the onset of the emergency rule, PDP and other activists actually took the case to court. It was reported that about 40 cases were instituted in the court against this emergency rule, and none of these cases was heard. What does it portend for the judiciary?
Well, number one is that those who took case to court, they are expressing their constitutional rights to seek interpretation at the court of law, and it's within their rights. But for the judiciary, I think there should be the spirit of promptness. There should be a kind of time consciousness in attending to issue. We don't allow issue to linger for so long before we attend to it. There are certain things that should be on what we call a line of emergency when you're attending to it, because that's
they do, because we have seen some cases that they attended urgently in the matter of emergency. But however, in this situation, even when the case was instituted, some of these cases are the Supreme Court. You know, Supreme Court is the interpreter of the Nigerian Constitution. Yet it was laid back. He just refused to entertain it.
Well, most of the time, what we saw outside might not be what was actually happening to the recipient of that case. You understand? And they cannot publish everything that goes there to us. We cannot take the judiciary to guillotine for what we don't know was the reason. Because most time when you see the court, there are 1,001 cases waiting. And this way they schedule cases. If your case is not meant to be called, there are cases before yours. Let's give them excuse.
All right, thank you so much. With everything all said and done, 6 months, Fubara is back to government house. So what are we going to be expecting? Are we still going to see a face-off between the executive and the state legislature?
Well, what I'm expecting is that this lesson is supposed to be abiding permanently. You see, what is important in governance, what is creating crisis is actually more personal interest than academic interest.
Of course.
The essence of governance is academic interest. What binds the citizen and the leadership together are academic interest. What do I mean by academic interest? The good road you're going to give them. It cannot create problem. If you are going to if creating good road, it cannot give you problem. Creating world-class hospital cannot create crisis. Creating a quality education cannot give crisis. It is when you are defeating from academic interest into personal interest that you make crisis at the junction. We expected that now the governor of River State should now put people as a priority, develop the infrastructures, build people, lift younger people, get them out of poverty, construct, do things that is going to make people feel, oh, we miss you. And that is going to make even those people that felt they own you be proud of you, that, oh, you are very proud. That's governance.
So how going forward, how do we hold our leaders accountable? Because you just spoke about good governance, that is what's expected. So how do you now hold our leaders accountable?
Number one is there is this content of democracy that people don't use well. People either abuse it or it's that public opinion. It is within the right of the citizen to talk about their government. Whoever does not want to be talked about should not approach governments. Stay in your house, nobody will talk about you. But the moment you have said vote for me, you have said talked about me. So then when we see what we feel is not too cool, and that is a content of the contract between the leadership and the led. If it's failing, we should talk. But when we are talking, we should be moderate. It
should be civil.
Sure, you understand? And for instance, you want to address a local government chairman in your area about the Trunk C Road. Give the picture of this Trunk C Road, the terrible situation of the Trunk C Road. Talk about the road, not the person of the local government chairman. They talk about the Trunk B road, the bad road. For instance, I did one thing in my state. I have a catalog of close to 50 bad roads, terrible roads in my state. You understand? Then I put them on Facebook, on WhatsApp, then till it reached the governor. And I want to tell you that more than 20 of them, as we speak, has been attended to. So you don't have to attack personality, look at issues, and be cerebral about your presentation. So presentation by virtue of laws that has to do with media laws and all these things could land you into libel or slander. So we have to be mature. The number two is that when people are coming to us, that we should put them in the place of leadership. We should ask of their antecedents. What have they done before? You understand? Where have they failed before? Where have they succeeded before? Then we know that we can move ahead.
All right, thank you so much. And lastly, on what we are going to be discussing is not much anyway. However, yesterday it was reported that federal government says it has given or doled out 330 billion naira to poor Nigerians. And yesterday, Labour, in response to that, said the federal government should publish the list of these poor Nigerians.
Well, when that news filtered into public, you see, there's something that leadership should try to achieve: public trust. If for long people's trust has been serially abused, people will withdraw their trust. Now, people were like, 300 billion to who, where? I think the Labour has said the right thing. Let the name be public. Maybe the name of people in your neighborhood will be there.
You'll be there.
And will be able to justify the published name and the amount mentioned. Because what we are seeing in the public now does not show that people's life has been touched. We must say the truth. Even if, you can't say because the song, if the song is bad, it's bad. You can't say they sang it in the palace. It is bad. So let government convince us that 300 billion naira.
This is exactly what happened during that COVID lockdown, where the Humanitarian Affairs Minister and even the SA to the President, Muhammadu Buhari, then told us that they were able to give feeding to school children who were at home with millions. And when you ask them to publish these names, and the way he said you cannot expose these poor Nigerians just like that.
You see...
and the matter was swept under the carpet just like that, and we didn't hear anything from it again.
You see, the issue is just that, honestly, leadership takes citizens for granted in this country because they possibly know that the citizen will spiritualize the whole thing, live out for God. You understand? You can't leave everything for God. God has given you discretion to question, to interrogate. How will you feel people out there when they are on holiday? Did you take the Indomie to their house? Now we're coming to that sub again. You see, this humanitarian thing, if not that people's conscience are dead, if it's not dead, you're talking about cheating the poor people again. You understand? Look at it. When the late president was there, the one who is in charge of humanitarian misbehaved. Even this current government, the first lady that was appointed misbehaved. How will you now start enriching yourself from the poor people? Are you not afraid of cost?
Money meant for them. Unfortunately, Nigerians, just like you pointed out, Nigerians' consciences are dead. Some of our Nigerian leaders' consciences. Thank you so much. That's our takeaway from today's program, Inside Nigeria, where viewers, you've heard it from our public affairs analyst, Ismail Idris. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
On this note, we conclude today's Inside Nigeria, the second half of the program, where we had discussions on some of the trending issues. My name is Winifred Ubebo. I look forward to having you same time, same station next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.